and screw it, let's talk about a movie for a second. We're talking about The Hustler, and I was referencing some interviews that I've done where they just don't give you much, and it reminded me of the movie The Hustler in the very beginning when Paul Newman, remember he broke Nine Ball and he totally soft it, like did a, what was it, soft, so like the break, it barely broke, and he looked at Jackie Gleason and he's like, didn't leave you much. And Jackie Gleason, who plays Minnesota Fats, looks, he just analyzes and he's like, you left enough. He just runs the table.
Yeah, everybody knows Paul Newman's a great actor, right? Cool Hand Luke. But Jackie Gleason doesn't get enough credit. People just think of him as like Smokey and the Bandit or the Jackie Gleason Show. He's actually a super great actor.
You know his
Super great
you know
actor.
his last movie, and then we'll move on to the current events. His last movie is, I'd probably say, one of my top 15, top 20 movies. It was called Nothing in Common, where he plays Tom Hanks's father, and they have no relationship, and he ends up getting cancer and asks Tom Hanks to come back into his life. And it's really good. And he died, I think, shortly after that movie came out in 1986.
I don't think I saw that.
It was
I don't think
before
I saw
Tom
that.
Hanks became Tom Hanks.
My father, when we had the black and white TV show in the probably the 60s, two of the things that were like must watches, the Johnny Cash show and the Jackie Gleason show. And if you ever watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I know you have,
Because we've talked about it.
a couple times Brad Pitt says, like after he gets the laced cigarette at the very end, he says, and away we go. That was a Jackie Gleason signature on the Jackie Gleason show because, like a Dean Martin, I mean, you think about how we look at those days, oh, they were so straight-laced. Dean Martin show and Jackie Gleason show, the guys walk out with like a martini, okay? And it's like in a big martini glass. So it's like obviously not iced tea, you know? And Jackie Gleason is like spotlight, a high chair, like a bar chair, and he's got a cigarette and a highball or a martini, and he'd say, and away we go. A little thin mustache. They were pretty cool. I mean, look, I'm showing my age, but what the hell?
Wasn't he smoking?
But yeah,
Wasn't it 7 packs a day or something, or 10 packs a day? I think he
I
smoked.
I could believe it. But the yeah, for the Jackie Gleason was great, and the Smokey and the Bandit, all everything. He was always great.
I love the Smoking the
Anyway,
Bandit. The last one is The Toy. I mean, I grew up as a kid watching The Toy, which I guess was at the end of Richard Pryor's career, where he was kind of selling out and taking whatever role. But I don't know. When I was 6 years old, that movie was pretty good.
sure, got to do what you got to do. You got to pay the bills.
So where we're gonna start today, right? We got Venezuela, we got Russia, we got economy, precious metals. Pick a category. Let's do like Jeopardy today, Matt. Pick a
Yeah,
category.
everything coming together. And what we'll come back to is, we can talk about Russia, Ukraine, we can talk about Venezuela and the drug boat double tap. We can talk about Palantir and the stock market. But I think in the end, everything is circling back. If you drive the focus through all of these vectors, it all comes back to we're at the end of a debt cycle, and there's no way out of it. There's no magic trick that is somebody's going to come up with some genius idea to have a new financial system where we just all cruise through, and everybody pays their mortgage, everybody can pay their car payments, and there's no disruption, and life goes on as normal. Stores are full of food. They're just going to have to play a big presto switcheroo. Somewhere there's going to be a big presto switcheroo. It's like we're watching, the train heading for the bridge that was just blown up. The bridge isn't there. Train's going full speed, Amtrak, we're all on it. Nobody's worried because somebody somewhere has told us there's a plan to have like a new bridge there by the time the train gets there. All right. I don't see it. So I'm happy to talk about the near term things that, are obviously real in their own right. They're all real, but none of them are going to get us around the fact that the bridge has already been blown up ahead, which is there's no way out of this debt trap. And the you know everybody is closing in on us. All of these factors are closing in. This is why Europe is apparently going, the leaders of Europe, elected and unelected, and their elections are kind of a joke. They're like gearing up for war with Russia. They have no armies. They have no militaries. They're gearing up for war with Russia. It can only be because they want to knock over the poker table, chips go flying, the lights go out, shots ring out, and at the end of the day, they're hoping to skate through and be able to say, don't blame me for the crisis in Europe. It was out of our hand. It was an act of God, force majeure. We're just in a new world, and we'll have to figure out how to feed the people, but don't blame us. Well, we should blame them. The people that have led us to this point, it's been mathematically certain for a generation that we'd end up here. And they don't want to be blamed in the sense that, when all this spins out of control, that we point the blame right at Washington and New York and London, City of London, that they're going to try to say, it wasn't us, it was the Russians, right? It was the Russians. They caused it. Well, that's why we're like doing everything we can to provoke Russia into doing some action against Europe, like now sinking Russian or quote unquote shadow fleet oil tankers or attacking them with drones. When everybody, with a sixth grade education knows it's Americans and British behind all of this. The Ukrainians are just the guy that pushes the button on the HIMARS when it's an American, AWACS plane, American Predators, Global Hawks, satellites, Starlink, American HIMARS, everything about the missiles going into Russia is American or British or German, except for some Ukrainian major that is told, okay, major, push the button. Now it's a Ukrainian missile. Nobody is fooled by this. Now we've got a fleet assembled off of Venezuela, and every day there's more stories, more reasons why we're going to have to go to war with Venezuela. And I'm not sure what the real reason is. I'm hearing all of these things. Oh, it's the drug boats. Okay, I have no problem with blowing up drug boats. I never did, never would. But it's okay. Venezuela is the root of all of the Dominion voting machines. Somehow they come from, the chips come from China. They go through Taiwan. They wind up in of all places, Venezuela. That's the Patrick Byrne story. And he's, I love Alex Jones, and Alex Jones has him on all the time. Patrick Byrne is a intel asset, admittedly. So I don't know what story he's peddling. I can't sort out in this wilderness of mirrors what's true and what's a narrative. A narrative to get us to go to war. It's the drugs. It's the Cubans in Venezuela. It's the voting machines. So we're about to go to war in Venezuela. We've given Maduro a week notice that he's got to clear out, and now he's like marching around saying, "Screw you, gringo, we're not leaving." I mean, it seems like this December could be very historic. We're ending a year, going into 2026. The stock market is basically being propped up by the Magnificent Seven, completely artificial construct. I don't know, what leg is going to get pulled out from the stool, but I don't think this is going on for a whole lot longer.
Well,
and I think we're just being set up for narratives to explain why all this shit hit the fan. Don't blame us; it was somebody else.
Well, you listened to my conversation with Sam Faddis, and I
Yes.
I asked him some questions in relation to Venezuela because, again, I'm no expert. I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. That's why I have people on. So people that write nasty comments to me that I don't know anything, yeah, I admit it. I don't know anything. That's why I started all this, was to learn. But in relation to drug boats, I just find that hard to believe because you can freeze up these people's money. These are billions of dollars. These are
And
not.
the drug boats are important. The
No,
drug
no,
boats are
hold
important.
on, let me finish. These are cartels. These are not whatever these groups are called in Venezuela. Billions of dollars. If you freeze their money, they can't do anything. And these money are in banks.
A lot of the money is cash both ways. A lot of this money is not electronic.
Billions of dollars.
The, did you ever see the pallets of cash we sent to Iran and that we sent into Afghanistan? Pallets of $100 bills, pallets. So a lot of this is cash in both directions. They smuggle the drugs into America, and then they smuggle they smuggle the cash out. So it's not all electronic that you can somehow intercept. But the drug boats themselves, I've got no problem with that. We don't need aircraft carriers to do that. You could accomplish that mission with a 10% smaller, a 10% of that footprint without carrier battle groups and, 10,000 troops in Panama and Puerto Rico ready to go. Now, I will say, and I support Trump 100% in this, and Pete Hegseth, for the last 40 years, we've played a game of Keystone Cops in the drug war. And what I mean by that is whether they're using semi-submersibles or go-fasts or fake fishing trawlers, long-range boats, or even sailboats, we had to cover the Caribbean and the Pacific with the Coast Guard in little cutters that have a very limited span of the view. It's not like they've got the NSA talking to them hour by hour, giving them a complete picture of every little boat in the Pacific or the Caribbean. No way. So we'd have to find a go fast in operation that happened to be seen by a Coast Guard cutter's radar or their airborne helicopter. Their helicopter chases after it, fires some 50 caliber rounds from a Barrett, in the side of the helicopter, in the water in front of the boat. If they don't stop, try to disable the boat without hurting anybody by firing into the engine. If you can stop the boat, now the Coast Guard cutter can circle, can get into range to launch a rubber boat. So you can go out and essentially on the middle of the high seas, read the rights, give the Miranda warning to the smugglers and put them on the Coast Guard cutter, which is, steaming into range. The Coast Guard cutter takes them to Miami or San Diego, where they bond out in 24 hours and they disappear into America. So this has been like a joke for 40 years. The war on drugs has been a total joke. The guys running these drug boats, whether it's a trawler or a go fast, whatever it is, they could care less. If they make the mission, they get paid, they go home. If they get arrested by the Coast Guard, they go to Miami or San Diego, they're into America. They're gone, right? The Lawyers Guild and the ACLU springs them out. Liberal judges spring them out. They're in America. They could care less. If they do a year or two, they could care less. They're back home. What we're doing now is actually hitting the boats. And this cuts right into the financial chain. People say, Matt, these go fast. They can't make it from there to America. Of course not. It's a chain. So if you can cut one link of the chain every time, the first link, the whole chain falls because they're not getting to the next spot where they transit or transfer to another modality, an airplane, another boat. You're chopping the chain right there at Venezuela. So this is important and it's significant. I've got no problem with the double tap. The whole thing about the double tap is a misallocation of the land rules of war, where if you're on the land and you're Americans going into Germany or Russians going into Ukraine, and you take a position and you've shot some of the enemy and some of them are wounded, but you're now taking those trenches, you're not supposed to shoot that guy that's now laying there with his hands up surrendering. You're supposed to, give him tourniquets and bandages and send him back to the rear as a POW. Give him medical care. But if it's an enemy armored personnel carrier and you're attacking it from the sky, there's never in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Russian Donbass, there's never a situation where it's like, oh, we hit the APC. Those guys are now running into the tree line, but we can't touch them because their APC's disabled. That's bullshit. If the drug boat is still floating, you hit it till it's gone to smithereens, right? If those barrels are still floating around, they'll be picked up. So I've got no problem with that. The problem I have is Trump being played into going kinetic inside of Venezuela, probably Mexico too, very soon. And I get all the arguments. I hear all the arguments. The cartel, like Steve Miller said, the cartels own the entire American border, not the Mexican government. I get it. And in moral terms, I've got no problems with airstrikes against cartels, predator drone hellfire attacks. But we have to understand that they have a lot of power inside of America. And it's not going to be like we're attacking, ISIS in Iraq on the other side of the planet. These guys have suborned congressmen, judges, all kind of politicians, businessmen. They have safe houses. They have networks across America. And when we kinetically go after these cartels, especially in Mexico, very hard, they're going to retaliate in America. They're going to be kidnapping families, like Stephen Miller said. They're going to be going the full cartel. So we have to know what we're in for in this kind of a war. And I just made this. I made this today. I don't have like a high-tech thing here going on. Can you see that all right?
It's very high tech. It's so high tech. It's that AI?
Yeah. That's Venezuela. Okay?
Hear what I said, Matt?
Yeah, AI with my fingers. So this is South Vietnam, okay? This is Venezuela. Venezuela is 5 times bigger than South Vietnam. We had 500,000 American troops there, and like over 40,000 were killed over the more than a decade. We tried to stop the Chinese and Russians from resupplying South Vietnam by coming in through third countries. We had B-52 bombers doing these things called arc-light missions, which just turned hundreds of miles of Vietnam into the craters of the moon. It's just still today, like giant ponds made by B-52 strikes. And we never stopped Russia and China from resupplying the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army inside of South Vietnam. South Vietnam is only 1/5 the size of Venezuela. There are bigger jungles and bigger mountains in Venezuela. Venezuela has 5,000 kilometers of land border with Colombia, Brazil, and Guyana. This is important because the current governments in Brazil and Colombia support Maduro. That means that if we do some lightning strike, which would be great, and we capture Maduro like a Black Hawk Down that goes right, and we capture the boss man, and we take him out, and all of the Venezuelan militias and military, they surrender, they wave the white flag. This would be absolutely fantastic. We march into Caracas and everybody's waving American flags and Venezuelan flags. But they said that they were going to do that in Iraq, and it didn't happen exactly. All of these invasions we do, they say the people are just waiting for freedom. All we've got to do is show up and we're going to be welcomed. But remember, Venezuela has almost double the population of South Vietnam when we were there. 500,000 troops in that much smaller country than Venezuela. We won't be able to overfly Colombia or Brazil. They will not allow it. So we're going to have to send Rangers and SEALs and Green Berets to these borders that are like 800 kilometers from the Caribbean, right, against modern anti-aircraft guns, to insert our troops in to try to control 5,000 kilometers of border, little jungle rivers that are covered with, triple canopy at the top. a thousand little streams that motorboats can go take troops, take supplies and guerrillas in and out. People have no idea this is 5 times bigger than Vietnam with a much bigger population. And people will say, but Matt, you're too pessimistic. As soon as we show up, we'll do a couple, Delta strikes, some SEALs will go in, some Rangers, some Marines, and it's going to be great because they love us. And all we got to do is show up. But to me, the risk is it's going to be a Black Hawk Down situation or worse. It can be. I'm not saying it will be. And if this Venezuela operation, now that we've told Maduro, you have a week, and the week is over, right? He's still there saying, "Screw you, gringo." Then what? Do we back down? We've got an aircraft carrier battle group there. It's burning tens of millions of dollars a day just to be there with all of its escorts. We've got thousands of troops in Puerto Rico and Panama and elsewhere that are poised for some kind of kinetic action. It's coming up to Christmas. We're now in an era where soldiers and sailors are normally FaceTiming with their wife and their parents every day. They're doing homework with their kids, right, on FaceTime. And to keep the security, you're going to have to shut these down, which if and when they do this, it's a big signal. Oh, the fleet's just gone dark. The bases in Puerto Rico and Panama have just gone dark. What's that mean? We're coming into the Christmas season. Everybody should not think that all of these sailors and soldiers love Donald Trump.